And that there's nothing more important than getting down the debt, that we've got too much debt. You want to get it down more quickly and further than the government. And yet you've come up with an inheritance tax cut, a national insurance tax cut, a marriage tax relief, and now an expensive national citizens service. If you really meant what you believe, surely you would do none of that until you got the debt down.
Well, to get debt down, you need to do two things. One is to control what you're spending. Any family knows that. The other is to try and increase your income. Of course, we'll not be able to get wealth creation going, which is the bit that seems to be less debated in this country than the other parts, until we're able to create more jobs, get small businesses moving. If you talk to small businessmen up and down the country, who are the ones who will create the wealth, who'll create the jobs and the prosperity, they will tell you that it's actually harder to take on people than it was before, harder to get a property, harder to protect investors because of changes in the law. And of course, if they get a national insurance tax, on top of that, a jobs tax, that'll wreck the recovery. We've got to protect the wealth creators as we move forward.
Let's look at this idea of this marriage tax relief. It works out about £3 a week for those who get it. If it's so important, why will only a third of married couples qualify?
Well, it's a start. Now, you could say we could be spending even more money, which of course goes against your first question. There's a limited pot that we'll have. And it's a question of what values we're trying to support. And one of the values that we want to set out is that marriage is important for stability. Let me give you just one statistic on that. That 1 in 5 couples who are not married will break up before their children are age 5. That compares to 1 in 12 couples who are married. Now, clearly there is a social stability there, and we've got to try to encourage that. Now, it would be very nice to be able to extend that out. Perhaps if we create the sort of successful economy Labour are incapable of doing, we'll be able to do that.
Well,
but
is it your intention?
We wanted to make a start.
Come the resources, if they ever come. Is it your intention to spread this marriage allowance to all married couples?
Well, it would be nice to be able to.
Is it your intention?
Well, whether we're able to do that is impossible for me to say, and it will have to take its place in a very long queue of priorities of things we'd like to put right.
But if you're to, you know, Mrs. Thatcher used to talk about the strivers, and one example of strivers in this country are ordinary married couples, both of whom go out to work and strive to bring up their family as best they can as well. And they often both go out to work because they need the money. Under your system, they don't get this allowance.
Well,
why not?
Because initially we are targeting it at those lowest income families who we think need most encouragement in the current economic circumstances.
Stay-at-home wives?
Well, we want to encourage...
Why not working wives?
Well, we want to encourage people as best we can within the limitations of the money that we have.
Do you want to encourage wives to stay at home?
Well, if people can be encouraged to look after the children, that is great. In the environment in which we currently live, but people are finding it so hard to make ends meet, it's very difficult to do that.
This has nothing to do with children. The relief isn't related to children.
It is indirectly, Andrew, because that's the point I was making, where you have where you have married couples, they are far more likely to stay together through their children's upbringing than
for £3 a week.
Well, it's not a question of that. It's a question of setting the value. I mean, I've talked about this before. You've heard me talk about this before. That you have to start setting out what you want to do in terms of social change now. No one is expecting us to wave a magic wand, given that we've got over £900 billion worth of debt, and be able to do this overnight. But we are setting a signal of the sort of changes that we'd like to see.
Well, why don't you just say it? After all, David Cameron has said, quote, when attacked for making it such a derisory sum of money, he said the message is more important than the money.
But
what does that mean?
What he said was, it's a start, and we'd like to go further.
But you can't tell us whether that's what you intend to do.
Well, I can't tell you because I have no idea what the public finances are going to look like. Yes, it's something we'd like to do. Would we like to extend it? Yes. Are we going to be able to do it, and when? Don't know, because it's impossible given the financial constraints that we have. I mean, we're talking... I wonder, actually, if people watching this programme understand what the level of debts mean.
I understand that. That's why I wonder why you're going ahead with an inheritance tax and not compensating for failing to go ahead with national insurance.
Because of the point you made.
Setting up a citizen's service.
The point you made, the strivers, people who work and who want to pass something on to their children, who want to stand on their own 2 feet, who want to take personal responsibility. Why should they be penalised so heavily by the state if they want to put their money into property and give it to their families? We've got to start start helping the strivers. We've got to give people help who want to exercise personal responsibility and stop this big government knows best, one-size-fits-all Labour view.
If you were on the side of the strivers, you wouldn't be taxing ordinary people at 40%, which is what you will continue to do, and you wouldn't be giving people who inherit £1 million simply for being in the Lucky Gene Club, who are not strivers, £1 million tax-free. Where's the help for strivers in that?
We have always been the low-tax party. We have always been the party that's got lower taxes through better economic performance, and because we believe in helping those who want to help themselves and their families and their communities. And that, I think, what the election is going to boil down to. It's going to boil down to those on one hand who believe that all our problems can be solved by big government, big taxation, big spending, big interference, and those who believe that actually we should have a much bigger society where people have a bigger say in what they do, where we pass powers to local government, to local people, and don't have such a big, overweening state that thinks it knows better than we do how to run our lives.
Your party leader seems to be pretty inclined towards a lot of meddling and social interfering as well. That's what he's doing with the tax system and marriage. He's not beyond social. I mean, Ken Clarke once said that when he joined the party, we didn't believe in social engineering. He said that he didn't want to have a separate marriage tax, that this wasn't what the Tories were all about.
Governments always have policies that encourage certain social trends, we believed. For example, with the mortgage tax relief we had, that creating a home-owning democracy, the right to buy. All these things gave people the chance to stand on their own 2 feet. And that's what the Tory party is about. It's about big citizens, big communities, big society, not big government telling us always how we ought to do things.
Just before we move on, could you tell us, where's Chris Grayling?
I don't know, you have to ask Chris Grayling today, but he's been out and
Well,
about.
we'd like to ask him, but nobody can find him. Is he holed up in a safe house?
I shall give him a personal invitation from you. How about that, Andrew?
Could you get a message to him? Because we failed so far. Could you promise to get a message?
I shall get a message.
Can I say, Chris Grayling, if you're out there, give us a call.
We've got room for you.
We want to talk to you.
It will
Liam Fox.
It will improve your knowledge of
Fox
politics enormously.
Knows the safe house where you're living at the moment. We hope you'll be allowed out before the end of the election.
I'm sure he will. Now that. But Liam Fox, your reaction first to that discussion. One of the points that was brought up, one of the interviewees said, we don't want a weak party in government at Westminster being propped up by the parties in Northern Ireland. Isn't that a possibility as far as the Conservatives are concerned?
Nobody wants a weak government. It's not in anyone's interest to have a weak government.
What he means is one with a very small majority that's needing the support of smaller parties, which means compromises, in his view.
Well, we'd be subjected to all sorts of potential smaller parties. You were talking to George Galloway. I wouldn't like the Respect Party to be holding any sort of balance of power in any parliament. What we need is strong government. But the point about Northern Ireland there, which was, I thought, very well made by those in that discussion, is that people in Northern Ireland, on one hand, they're told you're an indispensable part of the Union. On the other, they're told your politics is different from the rest of the UK. We on the mainland get to vote for parties dependent on our socio-economic views in the traditional way. In Northern Ireland, politics has always been sectarian-based, and so it's very difficult for people to break away from the sort of community affiliations that were mentioned.
And that sad reminder, of course, this morning of some of that.
Exactly. And, of course, until we can get really away from that and get a whole generation moving away from politics which is based on who you were born, what religion you are and where you live, then it's very hard to make progress. Now, a lot of progress has been made. And in this election, of course, we have an arrangement with the Ulster Unionists to try to move that process forward, to give people in Northern Ireland the chance to vote on the same sort of policy mix that we get to vote on the rest of the UK.
Although you were criticised by within your own party for that as well. We'll come up to you.
You finished?
Yes.
Good point, though. I enjoyed that point.
It's true.
OK. While